if you will, go on ahead and open your Bibles to Matthew chapter 2. Matthew chapter 2. Matthew chapter 2.
He was a poet and didn't know it.
That's right. So we come to Matthew, and as we look at this chapter, we know Jesus was a toddler, roughly at this time. The designation of him as a child and the time frame that the Magi come with Herod, that their calculation was, probably between 2 and 3 years old, 1.5 to 3 years old. So we're outside of the nativity, but we are still here at the beginning. And what plays out, remember, the Gospels were written for the saints. People, when they're like, no, the Gospels were written to convert the world. No, they weren't. No. Some people get converted by reading the Word. Most people get converted by having the Word preached and taught to them. That's how it works. The faithful inform themselves and strengthen their faith by meditating on the Word. And so, for Jews who came to the gospel, a lot of these things we're going to look at, some of you might say, well, Brother Brian, is all that stuff really in there? And I'll say to you, yes, it is. Problem that most Christians have when they come to a gospel like Matthew is, for them, the Old Testament is just something that was back there. It doesn't really pertain to us. Yet, we saw in Matthew chapter 1, what? The book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. How Matthew's gospel opens up is the exact formula for the book of Genesis. And it ties it into the blessing of Abraham, and it ties it into the prophecies about David. And what we're going to see today is more of the drama of the narrative that has been played out for the 2,000 years before Jesus is going to come into play in chapter 2. It's going to come into play. So, if I can get a volunteer to read Matthew 2, 1 through 11. Actually, 1 through 12. Matthew 2, 1 through 12.
I'll do it.
Thank you.
Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. So they said to him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet, But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not the least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you shall come a ruler, who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had secretly called the wise men, determined from them what time the star appeared, and he sent them to Bethlehem and said, Go and search carefully for the young child, and when you have found him, bring back word to me, that I may come and worship him also. When they heard the king, they departed, and behold, the star which they had seen in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. And when they had come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented gifts to him, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Then, being divinely warned in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed for their own country another way.
All right. So, from whom is Herod descended? What race or group of people?
Well, he's king of the Jews, but you're talking about what, tribe?
What is his family origin? Herod. Herod. The family of Herod is a family from the Edomites. The Edomites. Who remembers where the Edomites come from? Nope. Nope, that's Ammon and Moab. Ammon and Moab come from Lot. Esau. Herod's descended from Esau. Jesus is descended from what brother of Esau? Jacob. Well, there's only two brothers. Well, I know. I'm trying to make the hints easy. Herod holds something that is neither his by birthright nor by blessing. These men show up referencing someone that it's their birthright and their blessing. What was the fight between Jacob and Esau about? Birthright and blessing. Esau's like, I don't need my birthright because I've got a blessing that Dad will give me. Then his brother supplants him or steals from him the blessing. At that point, his brother Esau wants to kill him. Now, some people think that's extreme. It's not. It's not. You think it's extreme because you've grown up in a place and a time where everything's nice, safe, and comfortable. But I'll throw this out to you because this I know people in this county understand. You took care of mama, you took care of daddy, and it was your second cousin twice removed that gets the house and all the land, and you're out. Now, next time you go to family reunion, tell me how civil you are to second cousin. When second cousin says, come get all your junk out of the house, your mama and daddy left it all to me, and I'm putting a gate up, and you ain't welcome back on the property. But that's where I went fishing. That's where I learned to swim. That I built that. And they say, I don't care. It's all mine, and you have nothing here. At that point, now can you understand some of the strife between Jacob and Esau? You say, well, Jacob was still bad. Esau was bad. Yeah, they're both bad. Each one bad in a different way. Do you realize that Jesus acts out the same part of Jacob? Because what Jesus symbolizes is supplanting the line of Esau. Now say, no, brother. Yeah. Herod has all this power. He's afraid of a toddler. Because the toddler that's born king of the Jews has a birthright and he has a blessing. How do we know he has a blessing? Well, because he's the son of David. That would make it his birthright. And he's the son of Abraham, and Abraham was always about the blessing. When you think Abraham, you need to think the word the blessing or the promise. David is a birthright. In the middle of Jesus' genealogy in Matthew is David. In the middle of Jesus' genealogy in Luke is David. When you count a genealogy, you're calculating what? Blessing or birthright? Birthright. Did you know you can't join the Daughters of the American Revolution if you were adopted into a family that has had 10 generations that are part of the DAR? You can't be part of it. Why? Because you're not blood. It's a birthright. But a blessing, does a blessing have to be calculated based on birthright? Who thinks yes?
It does sometimes. Is it a trick question?
Oh, no, it's not a trick question. It's a right-wrong question. Your answer's tending toward wrongness. Does a blessing have to be calculated on birthright? No. We go back to Genesis 12. You know, Lord tells him, get up from your kindred, tells him all that. Says what? I'll make you a great nation. The one who blesses you, I'll bless. And the one who curses you, I'll curse. And in you shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. That doesn't have anything to do with birthrights. So powerful is blessing that when chapter 13 of Genesis opens up, we read Abraham is very rich in gold, in silver, in cattle, and in servants, male and female. Because there was a Pharaoh that Abraham lied to. Right? And everybody, God blessed him for lying? No. Think back to the blessing. Whoever blesses you, I'll bless. Whoever curses you, I'll curse. And Pharaoh's a smart guy. He's got problems inside the Pharaoh house. And the Lord tells him, And so Pharaoh comes out and he says, you know, you didn't have to lie to me about it. All the stuff I gave you to enrich you, to have this strategic alliance, keep it, Abraham. Enjoy it. Take the blessing I've given you. Leave the land and nobody touch him on his way out. Do you know what happened to Pharaoh when he sent Abraham out with blessing? He was blessed. You know how I know that? Because the Lord told Abraham, whoever blesses Abraham will be blessed. You say, but the Bible doesn't say that Pharaoh was blessed. Yes, it does. The moment God said, whoever blesses you, I'll bless. I don't need to read later on that, sure enough, God blessed him. No. Blessing. Ishmael. Did Ishmael have the birthright and the blessing? Nope, because he was not the son of the promise. Yet, what did he receive? The Lord told Abram. He says, but your son Ishmael, he'll be great. And he'll be 12 kings. Who's the first son of Abraham? You know, everybody talks about the 12 tribes of Israel. Talk about the 12 kings of Ishmael. And you realize Ishmael gets 2 genealogies in Genesis? He's recorded with his generations twice. That's the power of blessing. So when these guys come with gifts, in verse 11, when they'd opened their treasures and they presented unto him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. See, I know you've heard plenty of preachers tell you the gold symbolizes kingliness, Yeah, okay, fine, whatever. To me, it's the bigger issue of Matthew 1:1. In blessing Jesus, what immediately happens for their benefit? But they're blessed to go home another way. They bless the one who is blessing incarnate. They give gifts. And God takes care of them. And God takes care of them. And so what happens with this fight between Jacob and Esau in Matthew chapter 2, when Esau pursued Jacob, what did Jacob have to do? I.e., when his mother found out that his brother was going to kill him, he had to leave to go to a different land. What will happen here? Okay. But as Herod is going to come against him, where does Jesus go? He goes down into Egypt. He still chases him away. He still chases him away. And in that fleeing and the return of Jesus, what did Jacob see when he was coming back?
Esau and the whole group.
Okay, before he sees Esau, two big events happen with Jacob. One is we have Jacob's ladder, which is what? Angels ascending and descending. Okay? And the second is with Penuel, we have Jacob wrestling with and working out the means of restoration and salvation with the Lord. Matthew chapter 1, not Matthew chapter 1, but John chapter 1. There was a guy, his name was Nathaniel, and he gets called. And Jesus says, I knew who you were, man. When I saw you under the tree, he goes, You're the Christ, you're the King, you're him. And he says, why? Because I told you I saw you under a tree. And then Jesus says to him what? He says, I tell you, you'll see greater things than this. You'll see angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man. He ties himself into the narrative of Jacob. On the night in which he's betrayed. On the night in which he's betrayed. And don't miss, the Sadducees and the Sanhedrin were tied to the family of Herod. They like to pretend they weren't, but there's a few times where we read in the scriptures that what? That they went out and they conspired with the Herodians how they might destroy Jesus. Politics makes strange bedfellows. But what happens to Jesus in the garden? He's there, he goes back and forth. We know, 3 times that he goes in prayer. He keeps coming back trying to wake his buddies up. Get them, pray for an hour. Just stay awake and pray for an hour. They don't do it. But what does he do when he's in that time where he's about a stone's throw from? He prays. How does he pray?
Great drops of blood coming from his
I think it's more of a northern and a western thing because I've never found it to be very big in the South. There's really only one sport that's big in the South, and that's football. Greco-Roman wrestling is the hardest sport you'll ever do. Harder than football, harder than any other sport in high school. Greco-Roman wrestling. You train harder than you'll ever train for football. And you train that way every week. And they make you fight guys bigger than you, and they make you fight guys smaller than you on the mat every single day. And if you run up against someone real good, you won't get up off the mat without a stretcher. Because he'll get your joints and he'll pull your joints out of socket as part of the wrestling match. Someone, that's not legal. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. and the exertion. How much strain must one person be under to sweat drops of blood? Could you say that it would be someone straining, like if you were fighting to get away from something, that if you stop fighting, it's going to kill you? Kendall, do you like escalators, Kendall?
They're all right.
They're all right.
I did when I was little. I don't mind them now.
You know the main reason I don't mind them now? Because I wear cowboy boots. But when I was a little kid, have you learned shoestrings? Do you have shoes with strings?
Yes, sir.
Okay. See, you're doing better than a lot of your generation. I mean, I'm glad they went to Velcro for a lot of kids. Who knows? Shoestrings are deadly.
Getting on the escalator.
I'm telling you, the first time I ever had terror as a child, going up the escalator, Mom and Dad kept walking, and my shoelace got caught, and I could not. And it started to twist my foot, and it started to pull the edge of my shoe down in, and I ended up on the floor. And you say, how come you didn't yell? I could yell and hope they got back, or I could fight. For years, I'd look at it and I'd jump to skip where it came up, and when it got close to the top, I'd jump so I'd skip that bar where it disappears down in. The only reason I ain't scared of them now is because I wear cowboy boots. There ain't no shoelaces on no Let me rephrase that. In my day, there were no shoelaces in men's cowboy boots. And then the Justin Company came out with those boots that they had laces on. And they called them cowboy boots. Just so we're clear, didn't nobody in the Old West wear cowboy boots and have laces on? Just so we're clear on that. He said, no, that was the first time that I ever fought for my life. You know, you say, how old were you? 5? Fighting for your life at 5 is different than fighting for your life when you're older. At 5, you think the escalator will kill you. It could. It could. Or at least mess you up. When Jesus is in the garden, he's wrestling within himself, and he's wrestling with the Father, and he's wrestling against the darkness. Not unlike Jacob when he gets his blessing, and the angel touches him and puts his joint right out of socket in his thigh. Jacob spends the whole night fighting, wrestling. And it starts with this fight. The fight that Jacob fought through his whole life. And Jacob never really got ahead of the curve. Who understands the story of Jacob still ends basically tragically? His mother dies while he's in the foreign land. His mother, who was his co-conspirator against his brother, who's also her son, and co-conspirator against his father, who's her husband. Please don't tell me about dysfunctional families till you've actually paid attention to the family of Jacob. Both directions. Jacob, all 12 of his boys, by the time he died, got along perfectly, and they loved Thanksgiving dinners together. You know what Jacob's solace was when he was old? That he got to see Joseph, that Joseph wasn't dead. That's pretty much it. Because as soon as Jacob dies, what do his brothers come to him? Dad told us to come to you. His brothers are still lying, scheming, deceiving against their brother in the name of their father. First they deceived against their father, now they're deceiving in the name of their father. They're never there. Kind of sounds like the 12 apostles, doesn't it? Some of them get along, but most of them. But when you read this, Jesus undoes what had been did, so that a new doing can be done. And you say that again. I can't. Especially not 5 times fast. What harm does Jesus have against Herod? How many think Jesus, at 1.5 or 2 years old, really knew who Herod was in the political machinations of Herod? So what harm? What harm does a toddler have against a king who's on his deathbed? Do what?
He's not going to stay a toddler very long.
Yeah, but Herod will be dead. Herod will be dead within 6 to 12 months at the out of what he does here.
Herod didn't know that.
Okay? If you know you're dying, what harm does a 2-year-old do to you? A 2-year-old that you've never met, that you didn't even know existed until 10 minutes ago. What harm did Jesus have in mind for Herod? None. But what harm did Jacob have in mind for Esau? Everything. Who understands that by the time Jacob comes back, Esau doesn't care about all Jacob's shenanigans? Remember what Jacob offered him? He said, I'll give you this, and I'll give you this, and I'll give you this, and me and my wives and all my kids, man, we'll be your slaves. And he's like, seriously, bro? I got more money than you can possibly imagine. I got more power than you've ever thought of. Dude, I'm just glad you're home. Relax. Come home, enjoy the land. Let's be at peace. Jesus undoes it. And yet, Jesus still fulfills that the line of Jacob will supplant the line of Esau. Yet Jesus does it with no harm. When you want an example, be cunning as a pit viper, but as harmless as a dove, this is it. Jesus has no harm for Herod. Yet, even as a toddler, he supplants the entire line and brings all of salvation history into this series of events. He receives blessing, he receives worship, and he harms no one. Herod, on the other hand, he stays in that place. Right? When they were departed, verse 13, Matthew 2, when they were departed, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, Rise, take the young child, his mother, flee into Egypt, and stay there till I bring you word, for Herod would seek the young child to destroy him. And he rose, took the young child and his mother by night, and departed into Egypt. And was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, Out of Egypt have I called my son. And this will come into play during the sermon. Jacob went to Paddan Aram, and Joseph later on went to Egypt. In the life of Jesus, is Jacob and Joseph both. Jesus is the fulfillment of the blessings and the promises all in one person. Now we get to the tough part of this section. Then Herod, when he saw he was mocked of the wise men, was exceeding wroth. That means he had a rage fit. Okay, anytime, if you have the old King James, anytime you see the word wroth, don't say, oh, he was really mad. No, in your head read rage fit. And that if he can destroy everything in the room in his rage, that's what wroth. When it says the Lord became wroth with Moses, when Moses was making excuses, the Lord became visibly, demonstrably enraged with Moses on the mountain. And that's when Moses said, I'll go, sir. God terrified Moses. After Moses' excuses, God had reached his point. So don't say that. God is love. Yeah, God is love. And God is not going to put up with us making excuses for everything under the sun indefinitely. And we'll see that again in our psalm this morning. So Herod's wrath, he sends forth and he slays the children that were in Bethlehem and in all the coast thereof, meaning within its borders. Now understand, Bethlehem is, back then, is about half the size of Lake Butler city limits. Okay? But how big is Lake Butler? Other than the post office box in Worthington and the post office box in Rayford, all of Union County is Lake Butler. So, no, it's not. David and Ann, you live outside the city limits, but you have a Lake Butler address. Tommy and Sandy, you guys live out towards Harmony area, but you have a Lake Butler address. When you say, read, in the coast thereof, there was Bethlehem proper, and then there was the area that everybody came into Bethlehem for. He doesn't want it missed. He doesn't want it missed. Now, some people say, how come God took care of the Magi? How come God took care of Jesus, but God let this happen? Now, I can give you the answer that most people like, and that is this. There are some things we just don't know or understand about God's plan, and when we get there in heaven, we'll understand it. And until then, we just have to blah, blah, blah. Okay? That's one approach. Mitch, I think I'm safe in asking you this question. If you're at a table with your wife, your granddaughter, and your daughter, and it's a table that only seats 4, and your other daughter comes in, and she's going to be there for more than 10 seconds, and she looks like she could use a glass of tea. Generally, do we get up and give our seat to the woman who came in and yield our chair? Yes.
Some households.
What, Phyllis?
In some households.
Well, it ain't my fault that ain't how you do things.
It isn't.
I'm sorry you a heathen. You know, I try and get you not to talk about how heathen you are, but you just won't not do it. Don't miss how corrupt and how bad the culture in Israel was in that day. Y'all, if some crazy pregnant lady shows up with some dude and they need a place to stay, I'm not putting them in the barn. He said, but you paid for that room. Dude, I'd go sleep in my truck. I give the crazy pregnant lady, you know, and how do I know she's crazy? He said, you're talking about Mary. What? Somebody was crazy in the scenario. Did you know God made women's bellies just like he allowed man to make turkeys? That little button, when it goes pop, that turkey's done. And you say, Catherine and I joke, you know, we joke when we see pregnant ladies, because when that belly button goes from innie to outie, and it's like, we're like, I don't know how you still got that little one in there, because it's time for that one to come out. Yeah, if I see that, it doesn't make sense to me to say, go down to the stable and give birth. We think there's some clean hay down there. Maybe you don't have to give birth to the kid in a pile of manure. You understand the people aren't as good as you try and make it. They're bad people. No room for them in the inn. Joseph and Mary were not poor like that. They were in a stable because no one would give up space for a pregnant lady that was about ready to pop. How do we know she was about ready to pop? Because they got into the stable and popped.
Pregnant lady that was in full-blown labor.
Yeah. They coming into town, they've been traveling, and you can't be bothered to give up your seat for the pregnant lady. That tells me something about the character of the people of Bethlehem. That tells me something about the culture. You know, I remember when Obama was president, a number of people, I can't believe nobody's assassinated him yet. And I told someone who said that to me, I said, seriously, I said, shut up about that. I said, let's think about this. I said, do you really want to assassinate the first black president of the United States? Whether you like his policies or not. And I said, what does that say where your heart is as a Christian that you're contemplating how come nobody's killed him? Then when it was Donald Trump, people on the other side of the equation that I also went to church with, I wonder when someone's going to kill him. He's the worst president we ever had. And I said, seriously? I said, when are you going to get over this? Now Joe Biden, people on both sides. I can't believe nobody's killed him. And I said, do you really want the second string? And I said, do you really want to take a chance of another president by default? I said, you do remember that there was a guy named Gerald Ford. He got it by default. I said, you need to pray for these people more than you contemplate how come ain't nobody killed them yet. Because what does that tell you about where the hearts of the people are? And what does it tell you when people had the gall and the audacity to say Donald Trump is God's choice, when almost everything in his life is against the Word of God? You say, well, the current president ain't much better. But as long as the economy's good, and I'll give you a guy, and it goes back to Mitt Romney, that this guy had been governor of Arkansas, and he had missed his presidential bid. And everybody gives him way too much because they weren't in Arkansas when he was governor and didn't see his tactics. His name was Mike Huckabee. You go back and you can find it. And because he was Southern Baptist, they asked him about Mitt Romney. And he said, I don't care about his faith, I care about his economics. What does that tell you about the true nature? Let me ask you, the economy was good in Herod's day. It was the best it had been in centuries. the people were content to be under that system and to live with the same kind of mentality. Because the guy that has the power to kill a bunch of kids is no different than the people who will turn out a pregnant woman right before her birth to whatever fate might befall her instead of giving her space. So when you tell me that everyone was innocent in Bethlehem of this, that's like saying everyone is innocent in America with the atrocities of some of the people that we keep voting back into office. I love when people say, we don't deserve a president like this. You say, until we get the perspective of the Magi, that the only thing different in this world is that the seed, the heir, the natural born, heaven born King of the Jews is the only way to go. There's only two sides, Jesus and everything else. And the Magi understood, and that's why they brought blessing to be blessed to the only one who is the blessing incarnate, that is the only one that's different from the world around him. And that's what we are called to be part of.